Hi, my name is Alejandro, and I will talk about peripheral devices. What is a peripheral device? The simplest definition for peripheral device could be uh, a device that if you add it to your computer, you can be able to rely to do an additional function. For example, always when we use our computers, we are using peripheral devices too. Like for example, when we are in online classes, we use the webcam, or when we click on the pages, we use the mouse, or we write our homework, we use the keyboard, etc. Okay. The external peripheral devices, there are devices which are outside of the cabinet of the computer, and they fall in five main categories. In We can see these categories just over here. The input devices, there are which devices which send data to the computer. For example, we have our mouse, the keyboard, the microphone, or webcam. There are just some examples. Output devices receive data from the computer, like for example, the monitor, the speaker, the projector, or a printer. The input-output devices provide an input or an output to the computer. Like for example, the headphones microphone, like I am using it now. I am listening some music and speaking from the microphone, and the touch screen of some computers, the digital camera, and the disk burner. Storage devices, there are considered in a subcategory from the input-output devices, and they storage data from the computer. For example, the hard drive, the CD, the USB, or diskette. And the communication devices connect devices and exchange information between them. They're also considered like a subcategory from the input-output devices. For example, the modem, a hub, the Bluetooth devices, and the Wi-Fi devices. The internal peripherals there are which are inside of the cabinet of the computer, and we divide it into categories. Inside of the computer are inside of the processor or microcontroller. Inside of the computer, there are part of the hardware of the computer, like for example, the graphic cards, the sound card, and the network card. Uh, Inside of the processor or microcontroller, we can find the general purpose input-output pins in the processor, like for example, or the ADC or DCA modules that are inside of the computer. Forms of communication between peripherals. All these devices needs to communicate between them, and they use these characteristics, and we are talking about them. For example, the simplex communication is unidirectional data transfers that just, for example, the client computer uh, just sent the data to the server, but the server is not capable to send the data to the client computer. The half duplex is when the data transfer is bidirectional, but not at the same time. And the full duplex is when the data transfers there are bidirectional and at the same time. The communication between peripherals also use serial and parallel communication. Here we have some example on how each one of them works. This is the parallel communication, and this is the serial communication. They also use synchronous and asynchronous communication. The synchronous communication is when the communication depends of the clock of the system, and the asynchronous communication doesn't depend to the clock of the system. There are some examples of way to communication between peripherals. Like for example, we have here the four common protocols to communicate between the peripherals, and there are also some technologies or protocols like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, or USB that we use to plug in the peripherals to our computer and communicate between other peripherals or to our computer. And this is all for me, and this is all for the peripheral devices.